Today on The Big Story, thousands forced to evacuate as floods hit Malaysia. Stay tuned for updates on the ground. PMD-related fires have reached the highest number in 5 years. And new data security rules for public sector agencies in Singapore on the back of recent data breaches. Find out more. It's a brand new week and you're watching The Big Story, where we'll discuss the top news of today and explain why it matters. I'm Dylan Ang, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. More than 9,000 people have been displaced by floods in Johor on Monday after being hit by heavy rain during the weekend. The other Malaysian states affected include Malacca, Pahang, Kelantan, Terengganu, Sabah and Sarawak, with Johor being hit the worst. Among the districts, it was Kluang, Mersing and Kota Tinggi that were the worst hit, with roads fully submerged in brown water. In Kelantan, the floods have claimed at least 2 lives, that of a 7-year-old boy and a 49-year-old man. Parts of Malaysia, especially the East Coast states, are hit annually by heavy monsoon rain. With us live from Kuala Lumpur is our Malaysian correspondent Trina Leong. Hey Trina.
Hey there, Dylan.
Hi Trina, so what's happening on the ground? What's the situation like?
Right now in Kuala Lumpur, it's been raining every day with flash floods across different parts of the city. Surprisingly, today we've yet to experience heavy downpour, although it has been drizzling throughout the day. But I can't say the same for other states. It looks like the severely flooded areas have moved southwards, from initially affecting northeastern states, Kelantan and Terengganu earlier this month, to now drastically impacting residents in Pahang and Johor. In Johor alone, I think we saw the number of flood victims continue to climb the last few days, jumping dramatically from 785 evacuees last Saturday to now today 9,348 evacuees at noon. So we've even heard of a man who was rescued this morning from the rooftop of his 4-wheel drive in Johor. Flood waters had gone up to, I think, about 8 feet deep, and the driver was stuck for 2 hours before help came. So on that same stretch of water, which links Mersing and Kota Tinggi in Johor, an express bus was also submerged in flood waters, but thankfully the driver and his passengers were brought to safety.
Right. Now, Trina, parts of Malaysia, of course, especially the East Coast states, are hit annually by heavy monsoon rain. Now, how does this year's floods compare to that of previous years?
Well, I would say that this year's flood isn't the worst as compared to previous years. But that being said, neither is it good when you have evacuees in the 5-digit figure. So Malaysia's worst flood, as most can recall, was in 2014 when over 200,000 people were evacuated, with 160,000 alone coming from the state of Kelantan. At that time, almost 24 people died. And in 2017, there was also severe flooding in Penang that saw 7 dead and over 10,000 evacuated. So I guess all in all, I would say that this year's flood is bad, but we have also seen worse.
Right now, Trina, on a final note, what should we expect to see in the coming few days? How is the forecast looking like at the moment?
It looks like we'll continue to see rainfall throughout the week across all Malaysian states. The Malaysian Meteorological Department forecasts heavy rainfall in Terengganu, Pahang and Johor until tomorrow, Tuesday. Meanwhile, heavy downpour is expected in Sabah until Wednesday. At the moment, the Meteorological Department has only issued a yellow alert for heavy rain, which is the least severe out of the 3 rainfall alerts. The worst would be the red alert, which is only issued if rainfall exceeds 240 millimeters a day.
Right. Thank you, Trina, for the updates on the situation in Malaysia. Of course, if you'd like to keep up to date with all the latest happenings, head on over to our website, straitstimes.com. Now moving on, the number of fires related to personal mobility devices, or PMDs, has reached its highest in 5 years. There were 73 PMD-related fires from January to September this year, and is almost equal to the 74 PMD fires for the whole of last year, according to the Singapore Civil Defence Force. In 2017, there were 49 PMD-related fires, up from 14 in 2016 and just 1 in 2015. A total of 71 victims were injured by these fires from 2016 to September this year. More recently, a 40-year-old man died in July after being rescued from his burning flat in Bukit Batok. The blaze was linked to 3 e-scooters found burnt in the unit. Now here with us in the studio to tell us more is journalist To Ting Wei. Welcome, Ting Wei.
Hello.
Now, Ting Wei, PMD-related fires have been more common in recent years. I think there's no doubt about that. Now, how significant are these figures?
So in terms of significance, I think it's quite expected because the number of e-scooters in Singapore have been growing year on year. So what we are looking at is just like the number of fires growing in a sort of a corresponding fashion with the e-scooters population. So if you look at the numbers for September and you compare it to the first half of this year, look at the number for the first 3 quarters, compare it to the first half of this year, I think the jump is from 49 to 73. So it's 20 around. It's growing at a sort of a proportional number that you expect. So in terms of what will happen after September, I think it's quite likely that the numbers will drop because that's when, like September is when the LTA's early disposal kick in. Early disposal scheme kicks in, so I think for that, like the numbers will drop.
I see. Now, owners of non-compliant scooters have been encouraged to dispose of them. Now, there's a $100 early disposal incentive if they do so before the end of December. Now, how has the response been like from the e-scooter users, so far?
So last month, LTA updated that 14,000 people have registered to trade in, dispose of their e-scooters. And I think the number, they are expected to update on the latest figures sometime this week. So I think the number is expected to show quite a big jump because ever since at the start when they started this early disposal scheme, I think it got off to a slow start, around 400 plus applications on the first day. But I think the trigger was after they banned e-scooters from footpaths early last month. So after that, it seems like the queues to dispose e-scooters at all these disposal points set around Singapore has been growing quite long. And so for the example that my colleague Gavin, who has been following this for a while too, when he went to Woodlands last month, he saw this queue that was constantly at 80 people for a couple of hours at least. And if you look at the pictures that he put out, it's really like the whole court is just full of e-scooters. So I think initially people weren't very enthusiastic because $100 frankly not enough to buy an e-scooter or to act as a compensation if the e-scooter was a useful device. But now that you can't really use it in that many places or it isn't as convenient as it used to be, I think people are opting to take out the $100.
Right. Now, Ting Wei, you mentioned the story you wrote together with Gavin. Now, you went to check out a disposal point. Now, how quickly, you actually noted how quickly each e-scooter can be taken apart and recycled. Tell us a bit about that.
So the process for that is like, after you go to a disposal points to throw away the e-scooters, the companies will collect the e-scooters and then after that they'll bring them back to their warehouse. So the company that we followed, like Gavin followed, was this firm called Viral Green. So in terms of how fast they can take out the e-scooter, from what Gavin observed, within 15 minutes they can dismantle one whole e-scooter and that's into 20 parts. And I guess they have to be fast because they have thousands of e-scooters to do, and one person, like even if you look at it, 15 minutes is still like there's still a lot of work to do. So what they do is that they take out all the different components like wheels, handlebars, the platform where you stand on, and then they sell it to different people who need the materials for other use. So in terms of this recycling, so 2 parts to it. Other than recycling the materials, there's also a safety aspect, which was why LTA introduced this disposal scheme, because there's the lithium-ion batteries on these e-scooters. So it's not that you can throw it away like normal trash because it's a fire hazard. So it has to be disposed of properly.
Yeah, this would be a safe way to dispose of all the e-scooters. Well, thank you, Ting Wei, for discussing this story with us. If you'd like to see Ting Wei's full story, visit straitstimes.com. And now let's move on to What's Trending, where Kim will share with us what's buzzing in the internetverse. Over to you, Kim.
Thanks, Dylan. It's time for What's Trending. First up, drama on campus at NTU. On Saturday evening, the police mounted a massive hunt at Nanyang Technological University after a 19-year-old student reported she was assaulted on campus. The student union then urged students to stay indoors. The hunt by the police involved officers' units like Ground Response Force, Gurkha Contingent, Criminal Investigation Department, and K9 Unit. But according to investigations, the student had apparently provided the police with false information. She is now under investigation. Next, fake news law POFMA invoked again. Opposition politician Lim Tian was told to correct his Facebook posts implying that the government spends more on foreign students than local students. This is the fourth time POFMA has been used since it came into force on October 2nd. The first time it was used was against another opposition politician, Brad Boyer, who then put up a correction notice at the top of the offending post. Meanwhile, Mr. Lim said he will be putting up a response on Facebook in due course. And finally, are you a fan of Yanxi Palace? Good news! Netflix will air a spin-off of the hit Chinese drama Story of Yanxi Palace on December 31st. Based on the highly successful original series, the new show will follow the story of Princess Zhao Hua in Yanxi Palace Princess Adventures. So get excited! And that's all we have for What's Trending today. If you've seen a story you want to share, link it in the comment section below. Back to you, Dylan.
Thanks, Kim. Now, all public sector agencies will be required to decide within 72 hours whether or not to notify affected people about a data breach. This is one of the new rules to be set in place next year to plug gaps in data security in Singapore. The public sector's internal data protection rules, known as Instruction Manual 8 or IM8, will be updated next year to make data protection measures clearer and plug gaps, said Government Data Office Director Kwek Soo Lin. This is the first major revision to data rules addressing long-standing criticisms that private companies are subject to stricter measures compared to those in the public sector. The gap in data protection measures came under the spotlight after a series of public sector breaches which involved the sensitive data of patients and students. With us in the studio to tell us more is journalist Haris Baharudin. Hey Haris.
Hi.
Now welcome to the show. Now Haris, how significant is this new move? How will this affect Singaporeans?
I think it's especially significant because it puts into writing standard practices for how data breaches should be handled in the public sector. So, I mean, no one is saying that the government has handled data security very poorly or has been wrong, but I think there's been some inconsistency amongst the 94 agencies in the government. So some agencies, like maybe those in the financial sector, maybe have more robust practices. So I think this is an exercise of trying to apply the best practices to the whole of government across the board. So no matter if you're a ministry, a stat board, an agency, it means that data is important and everyone in the public sector needs to get on board and really rethink or reorientate themselves about how they see data and prioritize its protection.
Right, yeah, it's a good way to standardize across everything. Now, the proposals were made, of course, by the Public Sector Data Security Review Committee, which was convened by Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong after a series of breaches. Now, can you give us a quick recap of those data breaches as well as their impact?
Okay, so this year there's been quite a few. I think especially in the earlier part of the year, there was the issue of the confidential details of 14,000 HIV patients that were leaked online in January. So this included their HIV status, their IC number and contact details. And then just about 2 months after, it was reported that the Health Sciences Authority, or HSA, one of their vendors had improperly stored the data of more than 800,000 blood donors on an unsecure server over 2 months in the system. So this included details like not just their names and RIC number, but also their history of blood donations, and when and how many they've actually gone through. And then less than a week later, ST reported that email login credentials of employees in several government agencies had been put up online for sale by hackers. And this, of course, is in the shadow of what was Singapore's worst cyber attack, the SingHealth data breach, where hackers got away with 1.5 million data of 1.5 million SingHealth patients and the outpatient prescription details of 160,000 people, including our Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong.
Right. Now, Haris, just on a final note, what are some of the biggest or most important changes in the updated data rules?
I think it's better to think of them less as changes and maybe more of sharpening certain practices that some parts of the government have already been doing, and also introducing some new steps that seek to sort of fortify data security. So I think perhaps one of the biggest things that will be included in this update of the IM8 is the requirement that all public sector agencies will have to decide within 72 hours whether to notify the affected parties about a breach or not, like you mentioned earlier. So if they're unsure of if people should know about this breach, like in the case of maybe it's got national security concerns, they can approach the government data office, who will then decide how to manage the incident. So, and I think another example is the sharpening of how data should be protected when the agencies have it. So, according to the updates that will be in the IM8, public agencies have to do things like watermark files downloaded to aid investigations in the case of data incidents, and they have to add random strings of data to modify that stored password, so that even if hackers get a hold of it, they can't read it, and they can't make use of it. So these are some of the steps that will be included in the IM8 that I think are quite good that they're including it, and it's quite important.
Right. Well, thank you, Haris, for coming on the show and for sharing more about this, about the new rules regarding data breaches with us. Now, there you have it, the top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com. And once again, I'm Dylan. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.